Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from, and what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. My name is Daniel Price. I've worked as a wilderness ranger for over 15 years. Most of those years have been spent in the White River National Forest, out near Rifle, Colorado. It's quiet work, lonely at times, sure, but peaceful. You get to know the rhythms of the land, the way the pines lean in certain wind patterns, the shift in animal calls before a storm, how silence usually means something's watching you. I never believed in folklore or cryptids or any of the stories older rangers would whisper over campfires. I thought they were just bored guys with too much time on patrol and too much whiskey in their blood. But that was before 2003. That was before the Chaffin Hollow incident. We got a call in early September. 2 college kids had gone missing: Camden Morales and Juliet Branks. They'd been hiking a less used trail just west of Chaffin Hollow, not far from the border of the Flat Tops Wilderness. Supposedly, they were experienced, brought gear, logged their route with the station, told their parents they'd be back by Sunday evening. But they never came back. I was assigned to the search along with Ranger Liz Coulter and a newer guy, Jack Embers. The 3 of us headed out at dawn the next day. The air was sharp with the cold bite of early fall, and fog hugged the ground so tight it swallowed our boots. We reached their parked car at the base of the trailhead. Everything was normal: doors locked, food wrappers in the back seat, 2 empty water bottles. Their footprints started off clear enough on the trail, but by the time we reached the first ridge, the fog got thicker. The prints vanished. It wasn't just the fog, though. I've tracked elk through blizzards, and those prints don't just disappear. The ground gets strange up there, mushy in places, hard and dry in others. It's like the forest can't decide what season it's in. Jack joked it felt like we were walking through a dream someone had half finished. Liz didn't laugh. She just kept glancing into the trees like something was pacing us. Around noon, we found their first campsite. The fire pit was still warm. Camden's bag was there, but Juliet's was missing. There were strange scuff marks in the dirt, not like anything I'd seen before. They looked like deer tracks, but were too narrow and too long, almost deliberate, like something was mimicking a deer, but didn't quite get it right. Jack pointed out tufts of dark hair tangled in the bark of a pine tree nearby. At first, I thought it was just elk fur, but when I touched it, my hand recoiled. It was coarse and oily, smelled like copper and wet ash. Liz said she'd seen something similar once on a reservation trip she did years ago. She muttered something under her breath, "Ye now Lucy." I didn't ask what it meant at the time. We decided to stay the night. We set up camp just off the trail near the edge of a ravine. As the sun went down, the forest changed. The birds stopped calling. Even the bugs went silent. It felt like the trees were leaning in, listening. That night, something came to our camp. It started with the whispering. Just beyond the firelight, we heard someone calling Juliet's name, then Camden's. Liz shot up, flashlight shaking in her hand. "Don't answer it," she said firmly, voice low. "It's not them." Jack thought it was just locals messing with us. He called out anyway. "Hey, Camden?" Juliet, we're here to help." The whispering stopped. For a moment there was silence so deep it felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. Then we heard something crash through the brush. Jack turned his flashlight and caught something in the beam, a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It looked human at first, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it seemed. It was too tall, maybe 7 feet, with long, sinewy arms and legs like branches. Its head jerked when the light hit it, and its eyes, reflected back like an animal's, but they were set in a face that looked disturbingly like Juliet's. It vanished before we could react. Liz screamed, dropped her light. Jack drew his sidearm, but he was shaking so badly he almost dropped it. We didn't sleep that night. Every hour we'd hear footsteps circling the camp. Low growls, whispers, and sometimes we'd hear our own voices calling out to us from the dark. The next morning, Liz was gone. Her sleeping bag was torn open like an animal had clawed it apart, but there was no blood, no drag marks, nothing. Just gone. Jack wanted to head back. I agreed, but we couldn't find the trail. We circled for hours, the compass spun. GPS wouldn't load. Every direction looked the same, and somehow the sun never seemed to move. Eventually, we stumbled back into that same clearing with the fire pit. The wood was still smoking. Jack started crying. We hadn't left. That night I heard Liz's voice calling from the ravine. "Danny, help me." It wasn't her voice, not exactly. It was hollow, like it had been recorded and played through a broken speaker. I didn't go to the edge. I just sat by the fire with Jack. We didn't speak, didn't sleep. At sunrise we finally found the trail again, or it found us. It was just there like it had always been, though I swear it wasn't the night before. We ran all the way back to the truck. When we got to the ranger station, Jack quit on the spot. Never even picked up his last paycheck. Liz was never found. Neither were Camden or Juliet. The official report said mountain lion. Locals didn't buy it. I went back to that trail once, just once, a month later, alone. There was a tree near the ravine I hadn't noticed before. Someone or something had carved into the bark a crude symbol, a human figure with antlers. Below it, 5 words. "You looked when we called." I've never gone back since, and I never will. My name is Andrew Callahan, and I was a ranger in the Redwater Ridge region of northern Montana for 15 years. I thought I knew the forest better than I knew myself, but nothing, no amount of survival training, search and rescue ops, or backwoods living could have prepared me for what I saw that autumn. It was October 2016. The air was just starting to turn. Days were still warm, but nights dropped into the 30s. That week, the trailhead at Ponder's Gap had seen 2 separate reports of strange screaming at night. Not mountain lion screaming, those are bad enough, and everyone around here knows what they sound like. These screams were described as human, but not quite. Like someone trying to sound human, one caller said. Ordinarily, I'd brush it off. Locals love a ghost story once the leaves start to turn. But one of the reports came from a retired biologist I trust. Guy lived up near Whisper Lake for 20 years. If he says something was wrong, something was wrong. So I took a small pack, my .45, and drove up to Station 12, the most isolated outpost in the entire district, about 3 miles from the trailhead, nestled deep in the pines. I hiked the last stretch in. My truck won't make it down the final dirt path unless it's bone dry, and the rains earlier that week had turned the road into oatmeal. I made it to the cabin around dusk, lit the wood stove, and unpacked. The ranger station itself is just a one-room pine box with a cot, a small desk, and a crackling radio that works when the wind blows right. There's a deck that overlooks the drop into Redwater Gorge. Beautiful view, if you ignore what's out there. The first night was still. No wind, no crickets. Not even the distant hoot of an owl. Just dead silence. I didn't sleep well. Second day, I hiked out toward the lake. Whisper Lake sits in the crook of Redwater Gorge, like a silver coin dropped into a pit. It's one of the most hauntingly quiet places I've ever been. While circling the edge, I found something that stopped me cold. A ring of deer bones, picked clean, arranged in a perfect circle with a pile of moss in the center. It looked almost ceremonial. I took a picture with my phone, which promptly died. Battery full when I left that morning. I stood there a long time just listening. Still nothing, no birds, no bugs, just wind through the branches, and even that sounded off, like it was moving through a hollow shell of forest, not a living one. On my hike back, maybe a mile from the station, I heard movement behind me. Slow, rhythmic footsteps. I stopped. It stopped. I turned. Nothing. But I got the sense that whatever it was wasn't hiding. It was watching, not like an animal tracking prey, more like curiosity testing me. When I got back, I latched the cabin door for the first time in years. That night, something walked around the station. I heard the steps through the dry leaves, steady, deliberate. I sat on the cot with my pistol in hand, lights off, heart pounding like a war drum. Then, from the porch, came this voice, low and scratchy, like someone who hadn't spoken in years. Ranger, that was it. Just that one word. It said it like a question. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just stared at the door, waiting for the knob to turn. It didn't. Eventually, the footsteps retreated, slowly, like it wanted me to know it was leaving. The next morning, I radioed the district supervisor, told him I was cutting the trip short. I didn't say why, just blamed a stomach bug. The radio popped with static, and then a voice replied, not the supervisor, not even anyone I recognized. Don't leave, Ranger. We haven't finished yet. I turned off the radio. Packed up. Didn't even eat breakfast. I made it out of there by mid-afternoon, never stopping to rest. I got back to town, handed in my gear, and took a few days off. But I couldn't shake what happened. Here's where things get stranger. When I developed the photos from my trip, because yes, I brought a film camera too, out of habit, I found an extra image, one I didn't take. It showed me asleep in the cabin, framed through the window, taken from outside. The angle was wrong, too, higher than a person's eye level, almost like it was taken from up in the trees. I showed it to the sheriff. He thought I was messing with him, told me to lay off the campfire whiskey. 2 weeks later, the biologist who'd reported the screams, he went missing. They found his cabin door open, the place ransacked, and an empty ring of deer bones behind his house. No signs of struggle, no blood, just a smear of moss on the windowsill and scratch marks around the back door, like something tall had crouched there, watching, waiting. I think those things out there, they mimic, but not just sounds. They mimic people, movements, faces. I think they watch from the trees, learn from us, and I think they're getting better at it. I left the Ranger Service not long after, moved south. Got a job with the State Park Service in Arizona. The desert's quieter, cleaner, and the things that hunt at night usually die with the sun. But every now and then, especially on windless nights, I swear I hear something in the distance. Not an animal, not quite human, just a voice rasping through the dark. Ranger, my name is Samuel Redbark, and this happened in 2002. I was 29, a member of the Lakota Nation, working as a wildlife officer out near the Black Hills. Most of my job involved tagging elk or relocating the occasional mountain lion that wandered too close to town. Nothing I couldn't handle until the incident at Old Rock Pass. Old Rock Pass is this narrow ridge road that cuts through a section of the hills no one really ventures into anymore. It used to be a logging road back in the 50s, but now it's nothing more than a broken scar through dense pine and limestone cliffs. Locals said it was cursed, claimed they'd seen lights up there or shadows that didn't move quite right. I'd always written it off as bad moonshine stories or leftover trauma from the uranium mining days, but I found out firsthand how wrong I was. It started when a park hiker named Teresa Choate went missing. Her boyfriend reported that she'd gone up toward the ridgeline alone the day before to take some wildlife photography and never came back. Normally, search and rescue handles that sort of thing, but I was already patrolling near the area, so I volunteered to start the search. I didn't go alone. My partner that week was a guy named Joe Running Water, older than me, twice as steady. He'd been with the service almost 15 years. We drove up together in the department's old Ford Bronco, the tires grumbling as we climbed over rocks and tree roots. We reached the ridge around 4 p.m. and started on foot. The trail was rough, fallen branches everywhere, and the wind had that smell, cold pine mixed with something faintly sour, like wet copper. About a mile in, we found Teresa's tripod. It was snapped clean in half like someone had stomped on it. Her camera was nearby, but the lens was shattered, and the SD card was gone. That's what really got to me. A hiker losing their gear? Happens. But someone intentionally removing the memory card? That meant someone else was up here. Joe squatted beside the tripod, touching the splintered wood. "Whatever stepped on this had weight," he said. "A bear, maybe. But bears don't take SD cards," I muttered. The sun was starting to go when we heard it, a high-pitched sound, almost like a child's cry, echoing faintly from down the ridge. I looked at Joe. "Mountain lion?" I offered, but he was already shaking his head. No, that's not a cat. His voice was tight. That's not a sound I know. We decided to follow it. About 20 minutes down the ridge, we found an old trail marker, one I didn't recognize, even with my years on this land. It was a stone, smooth and flat, with a spiral carved deep into the center, the kind of spiral I'd seen before in some of the older pictographs, but not out here, and not like this. Joe stepped in front of me, breathing hard. We need to turn back. Why? He stared at the spiral like it was burning his eyes. Because we're not alone anymore. That was when the lights started. Not flashlights. Not campfires. Just orbs, maybe the size of a basketball, glowing a dull orange, drifting slowly through the trees ahead. They moved with purpose, too slow to be drones, too erratic for lanterns. We stood there frozen, watching them dance between the trees, pulsing like slow heartbeats. And then we heard her, "Help me." It was Teresa's voice. No mistaking it. It was coming from the trees just beyond the lights. "Teresa," I yelled, pushing forward, but Joe grabbed me. "That's not her. That's not a human voice." It sounded like her, sure, but now I heard it. The rhythm was wrong, the pauses too long, like something was learning to talk. Then it laughed. We backed up slowly, rifles raised. One of the lights broke away and floated toward us. The air went cold, not desert night cold, freezer cold. I could see my breath hanging in front of me. "Back to the truck," Joe hissed. We turned to run, but we'd been followed. Standing between us and the trail was a shape, tall, gaunt, with long limbs and no face. Not really. Just smooth skin stretched across where eyes and a mouth should have been. But it had antlers, blackened, rotten things growing out like cancer. It didn't move, just stood there tilting its head like it was studying us. Joe raised his rifle and fired, once, twice. The echo slammed through the trees. The thing didn't fall. It didn't even flinch. It just opened its mouth, a horizontal gash that split its lower face, and screamed. I've heard mountain lions scream. I've heard coyotes dying. I've never heard anything like this. We bolted. No plan, just survival. Trees whipped at our faces, the ground disappearing under our boots. I swear I could hear it running behind us, impossibly fast, breaking branches and moaning in that same unnatural voice. We didn't stop until we hit the truck, panting, shaking, bloody from the thorns. Joe slammed the door, started the engine. The headlights flickered, then caught something in the beams. Teresa, standing in the road, barefoot, dress torn, eyes wide. Joe stopped the truck. I jumped out. "Teresa," I ran up to her. You're okay. But she didn't move, didn't blink. She opened her mouth. "Help me," she said again, then smiled. It wasn't a human smile. Too wide, too many teeth. Her pupils vanished, replaced by black pits. Joe screamed behind me. I turned back and saw the lights, dozens of them, encircling the truck, gliding toward us through the pines. I grabbed Teresa's arm, and it bent wrong, like rubber. She fell apart in my hands, crumbling into what looked like dry bark and old hair. I didn't stop to think. I ran back to the truck, jumped in, and Joe gunned it. We didn't talk until we were halfway down the mountain. "I don't know what that was," he said, eyes fixed forward. hands trembling on the wheel. But it wasn't from this world. We reported what we found, the camera, the tripod, the missing hiker, but left out the rest. You can't write faceless mimic demon with bark skin and voice theft abilities and a government report. Teresa was never found. No trace of her ever turned up. And the lights? They kept showing up even after I left the service. I moved away a year later, took a job in Oregon. I don't patrol anymore, but I still hear stories, glowing lights in the trees, voices calling out at night, something moving through the pines that doesn't leave tracks. I stay away from places like Old Rock Pass now, but sometimes I still see the lights just beyond the tree line, watching, waiting. My name's Jesse Crow, and before everything went to hell, I used to guide backcountry trips through the Black Hills, mostly week-long treks for folks who wanted to get away from it all. I knew those woods like the back of my hand. I respected the land, honored it. But no matter how well you know a place, there are always corners better left unexplored. The group that week was small, just 4 clients and myself. College-aged kids from Minneapolis, 2 couples on a road trip detour. They wanted the real forest experience. I figured fine. The weather was crisp, the fall foliage in full swing, and the trail I planned was remote, but manageable. No cell reception, of course, but I had my radio and satellite beacon. I wasn't worried. The kids were Tyler and May, Levi and Elena, young, loud, full of energy. I got the sense they weren't used to being unplugged. The first night was all jokes and s'mores and horror stories around the fire. Typical stuff. Someone brought up skinwalkers and wendigos, always the urban legends. I let them talk. I'd heard it all, but the weirdness started on the second night. We were camped near a ridge known as Raven's Shoulder. It overlooks a steep gorge, beautiful in daylight, ominous as hell at night. Around 2:00 a.m., I was woken by movement, crunching leaves and soft footsteps around the tents. My first thought was a black bear. I quietly grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, but there was nothing. The woods were silent, too silent. No wind, no insects, no animal noises, just stillness. I checked on the kids, all in their tents. But Levi was sitting upright, wide-eyed. "You okay?" I whispered. He just stared past me and said, "I thought I saw someone standing at the edge of the trees, just watching us." I panned my flashlight toward the ridge. Nothing, but I believed him. His voice was too steady for it to be a joke. The next morning, May said she had a dream of someone whispering her name over and over. Elena woke up with a bloody nose, and Levi's hiking boots were missing from outside his tent. Weird, but I didn't panic. Animals take things sometimes, and people dream strange stuff in the woods. That's what I told them. What I told myself. We pressed deeper into the forest. The ridge trail wrapped around the gorge and curved into a narrow, elevated pass that eventually descended into a place the locals call Hollow Creek. It's not on many maps anymore. Back in the early 1900s, a small logging camp was built down there, but there was a collapse in one of the hillsides. Killed everyone. After that, the area got a reputation. Superstitions, bad luck, the usual stories. Most people stayed away, but I figured, what the hell, we'd be camping above the old site, not in it. That night was colder. Everyone was tired and quiet. No more jokes. Something had shifted. The forest felt tense. At around 1 o'clock a.m. I heard whispering. Not the wind. Not my imagination. Actual voices. Coming from down the slope. I unzipped my tent and stepped out into the freezing air. I didn't call out, just listened. The whispers continued, rising and falling like breath, like chanting. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was wrong. Not English. Not any language I knew. Then Levi screamed. I sprinted toward his tent, but it was already empty. The others were scrambling out of their bags, panicked. We searched for over an hour. Nothing, no prints, no torn fabric, no sound. Like he'd vanished mid-breath, Tyler wanted to call search and rescue. I activated the beacon, but I already knew we wouldn't get a signal in the valley. I told them we'd hike to higher ground in the morning. The remaining 3 kids stayed close to me that night, huddled by the fire. No one slept. The next morning, we climbed the pass in silence, heading toward a nearby summit I'd used before to get signal. We were halfway up when May started crying. Her voice shook as she told me she saw Levi standing in the trees the night before, watching her. He didn't look right, she said. He was smiling too wide. Tyler snapped, accused her of making it up. Elena tried to keep the peace, but none of us could deny the growing sense of dread. The forest wasn't just quiet anymore. It was listening. We reached the summit around midday, and I got a weak signal. I sent the emergency alert and our coordinates. Then we waited. That night, the whispering returned, louder, closer. It was everywhere. Not one voice, but many, dozens, hundreds. Like the forest itself was speaking in tongues. I told the kids to stay put and went to check the perimeter. I took my rifle. I didn't believe it would help. I found Elena standing in a clearing a few hundred feet from camp. She was barefoot, her face blank. "Galena?" I whispered. She turned slowly. Her eyes were pitch black. No sclera. No iris, just darkness. I stumbled backward, nearly dropped the rifle. She smiled, too wide, and walked into the trees. I didn't follow. When I returned to camp, May was gone. Tyler was curled up in the dirt, crying. They called her, he said. They told her it was okay. I grabbed him, forced him to walk. We hiked back toward Raven's Shoulder, hoping to meet search and rescue halfway, but something followed us. I could feel it. We reached the ridge just before dawn, and that's when Tyler stopped. I turned and saw him staring into the trees. "She's there," he whispered. Then he stepped backward off the ridge. Just like that, gone. They found me 2 days later, disoriented, dehydrated, alone. When I told them what happened, they searched for weeks. Never found a single trace of the kids. Not a scrap of clothing, not a shoe, nothing. The official report said they were lost. Got turned around. But I know the truth. I've since left the job, moved to Rapid City. Haven't been back in the woods since sometimes I still hear the whispering when it's quiet, when I'm alone, calling my name, and I know deep down that the Black Hills aren't finished with me yet, not by a long shot. My name is Thomas Rainwater. I was a seasonal fire crew lead with the National Park Service back in the late 2000s. We mostly did prescribed burns and cleared brush, especially in the more overgrown parks that didn't have regular visitors. In the fall of 2009, I was assigned to a quiet little park called Devil's Glen Preserve in eastern Iowa. Not many people outside the state even know it exists. 2,000 acres of rolling woods and limestone cliffs tucked away behind farmland and river bends. Beautiful country, but the kind of place that breathes a little too deeply at night. I was sent in with 3 others, Liam, our Sawyer, Carla, a field tech from Minnesota, and Owen, who was new and barely spoke a word. Our job was to do fuel reduction across the southern ridge, clear out the old pine and maple blowdowns before they became a fire hazard. It was supposed to be a week-long job, quick and uneventful. We arrived on a Monday morning. The ranger station was unmanned, just a note left on the clipboard that read, "Trail work postponed past the bluff. Stick to marked areas." No explanation, no signature. We figured it was some hiker warning, or maybe the local warden being cautious after a storm. Still, it put me on edge. The first few days were fine, quiet, productive. We camped near the trailhead, set up our gear, and spent the daylight hours sawing through brush and deadfall. Liam kept things light with bad jokes, and Carla always had some ghost story about every patch of forest in the Midwest. But then Owen started acting strange. At first it was little things, wandering off without telling anyone, standing too long just staring at nothing. Then, late on the 3rd night, I caught him outside the tents, barefoot in the dirt, muttering under his breath. His face was pale and glassy-eyed, turned toward the slope that led deeper into Devil's Glen. "Owen," I asked, "you all right?" He turned to me slowly and said something I'll never forget. "They're calling us from under the roots." He didn't say anything else, just walked back to his tent and zipped it shut. Carla joked about it the next morning, but I was already watching the woods a little closer. There was something wrong with the way sound moved out there. You'd hear a bird call, and it would echo too far. You'd snap a branch and hear a second one break a second later, like the forest was answering you. That evening, Liam didn't come back. We'd split up to clear more ground, and by sunset he still wasn't at camp. I radioed, but all I got was static. Carla and I hiked the trail loop twice. Nothing. No tracks, no sign of a struggle. Just his helmet and gloves laid neatly on a moss-covered rock about a mile from camp. The next morning, Carla wanted to hike out and report it. But Owen said something that made my blood run cold. If he's quiet now, it's already too late. I asked him what he meant. He just smiled like it wasn't even him behind his eyes anymore. We packed up camp anyway. Carla and I agreed. We were hiking out and leaving Owen if he didn't follow. The trail back was uneventful at first. but halfway up the ridge I noticed something off. There were boot prints next to mine in the dirt, the same tread as Liam's boots. I crouched and counted them. They were fresh. Not only that, they circled ours. Like someone had been walking alongside us just out of sight. Carla noticed them, too. She went pale, then dropped her gear and started jogging ahead. I called after her, but she was already gone over the ridge bend. I ran after her, and that's when the forest went silent. I don't mean quiet, I mean dead silent. No wind, no birds, no insects. Even my footsteps sounded muffled. It was like the air was holding its breath. Then I heard whispering, soft and distant at first, like wind rustling leaves, but the wind wasn't blowing. I followed it out of instinct, hoping it might lead me to Carla. That's when I saw them. Figures, tall and thin, like stretched shadows between the trees. They didn't move like people. They swayed, pulsing slowly with the rhythm of the forest. They didn't make noise. They didn't breathe. I froze. My body wouldn't move. Then Carla screamed. I ran blindly, crashing through brush and branches, until I found her, or what was left. She wasn't torn apart. She wasn't bloody. She just looked hollow. Her skin was pale, lips parted slightly, like she'd been trying to say something. Her eyes were open, but they weren't seeing. Beside her, etched into the dirt, were symbol spirals and slashes that pulsed with moisture despite the dry ground. Then Owen stepped out from behind a tree, but it wasn't Owen anymore. His body was still his, but something had changed behind his eyes. His movements were smooth, too graceful. His voice was soft, like silk wrapping around your ears. "You stayed too long," he whispered. "What are they?" I asked. He tilted his head. "They were here before the roots, before the stone. They don't take you. You become them." I ran. I don't remember how far I ran or how long. The sun was just beginning to rise when I reached the service road. A survey truck nearly hit me as I stumbled into its path. The driver was a park tech, confused and horrified. They found Carla's body, but no trace of Liam and Owen. No one found him either. The official report called it exhaustion, trauma, possible misidentification of wildlife activity. I never went back. I moved west, took a desk job. I haven't walked into a forest since, but sometimes when I close my eyes and let the quiet settle, I hear them whispering under the roots, waiting for me to come back. My name is Darren Gray Wolf, and this happened to me in the fall of 2002. I was working as a seasonal trail coordinator for the Forest Service near Echo Hollow in Washington State, an isolated stretch of land bordering the Olympic Peninsula. The region's thick with fir and cedar, often wrapped in fog that makes the world feel a little thinner out there. I was raised Ojibwe, but after my father passed, my mom remarried, and we moved west. I never lost that part of me, though. My grandfather used to say there were places the land never forgot, places where old things still wandered. Echo Hollow, I would come to learn, was one of them. My assignment was simple: flag deteriorating trails and mark hazard zones for a rerouting project the following spring. I'd been given a map, a radio, and an old two-way GPS unit. Nothing fancy. I'd be staying in a refurbished ranger's cabin about 8 miles off the main service road. No neighbors, no cell signal. Just me, the trees, and the sound of the wind threading through the pines. The first 2 days were uneventful. I spent my time walking the ridge trails, noting erosion points and snapping photos of collapsed switchbacks. The place was quiet, quieter than I expected. Even the birds kept low. Fog moved in each afternoon and sat heavy over the treetops, which was typical, but this was different. Thick, almost intentional. It moved like it had a mind. I didn't think much of it until the 3rd day. Around dusk, I was hiking back toward the cabin when I saw something strange near a trail junction. A rock cairn, only it wasn't made of stones. It was bone. Cleaned, stacked carefully in a spiral, maybe 2 feet tall. Deer bones, maybe. Small animal skulls nestled in the center. At first, I thought it was a prank. Locals sometimes left weird things to mess with new rangers, but this felt too old, too deliberate. That night, I sat by the fireplace, flipping through old ranger logs I'd found in a locked drawer. Most were routine weather notes, animal sightings, fallen trees. But the logs from the 1980s started to shift tone. One ranger had written, "Saw them again in the fog. Same place near the hollow. Heard the whispering." Another entry, "Don't go near the standing stones. Doesn't matter if you don't see them. If you hear the singing, turn around." The hairs on my arms stood up. I tried to sleep, but the wind had picked up, and with it came a sound I couldn't explain. It wasn't howling. It was humming, low and steady, almost musical. The next morning I went back to the bone cairn. It was gone. No sign it had ever been there. No prints. Nothing. The fog clung low to the trees like a living thing, and I started to feel like I was being watched. Every creak of a branch or scuttle of something small in the underbrush made me flinch. I chalked it up to nerves. Isolation can mess with you if you're not careful. Later that afternoon, I hiked toward Echo Hollow proper, a deep basin of old-growth forest that hadn't been logged in over 100 years. As I descended, the air grew colder, the light dimmer. Moss hung thick from the branches like curtains, and the fog pooled in the lowlands like water. That's when I heard it again. Whistling. Not wind. A tune. Deliberate. Repetitive. I froze. My gut screamed at me to turn back. But I kept going, drawn forward like a thread was tugging at my ribs. And then I saw them, figures barely visible in the fog. Tall, thin, standing between the trees, unmoving. Watching. I stepped back, my boot snapping a branch. The figures vanished like smoke. I turned and ran. I made it back to the cabin by dark, locked the door, and didn't sleep. I stayed by the window all night, clutching the GPS and my knife. Around 3 a.m., the fog pressed against the glass like a living sheet, and for a moment, I swear, I saw a hand, long with too many joints. By morning, I'd made up my mind I needed to leave. I packed fast, shouldered my gear, and headed north toward the main trail. But something was wrong. The GPS wouldn't lock a signal. My compass spun aimlessly. Every tree looked the same. and the trail I marked the day before was gone. Covered, replaced. I was lost. I tried retracing my steps. Hours passed. The fog never lifted. That humming returned, closer now, circling me. I stumbled upon another cairn, taller this time, with a crow's skull perched atop like a crown. My head pounded and blood dripped from my nose. Then came the voices, not loud, not angry, just wrong, twisting around my thoughts. "We remember you," they whispered. "You left us. You forgot the old ways." I dropped to my knees, clutching my head. I prayed in English and Ojibwe, anything to drown it out. And then, just like that, it stopped. The fog began to clear. The sun broke through the canopy. My GPS beeped and flickered to life. I was less than a mile from the road. I never found the cabin again. They sent a team out later that week to investigate, but they couldn't locate it. My tracks vanished halfway down the trail. The bone cairns were gone. So were the ranger logs. I quit not long after. Moved back east. Took a job teaching wilderness survival instead of living it. But sometimes when the fog rolls in, I hear that humming again. Faint, calling. And I remember what the forest told me. "We remember you." My name is Kyle Redfeather, and this happened to me in the fall of 2004. I was 31 at the time, working as a wilderness fire watchman in the Sawtooth Mountains of Idaho. It's quiet work, mostly uneventful, days spent in the tower, scanning the horizon, making sure a lightning strike hadn't started something that could get out of control. That solitude suited me just fine. I'd grown up around forests, descended from generations of Nez Perce, and I'd always found more comfort among pine and stone than I ever did among people. The tower I worked from, Station 14, was remote. To get there, you had to take an ATV 10 miles past the ranger outpost, then hike another 3 miles up switchbacks. It sat on a rocky ledge overlooking a vast valley of evergreens, with the crags of the Sawtooths clawing at the sky on the far horizon. There was no cell service up there, just a radio and an old wind-up emergency beacon. I rotated with one other guy, Marty Lowell, an older fella who liked crossword puzzles, and never said much unless he had to. When it was my shift, I'd be up there for 4 days straight. Food, water, stove, bed, all in the cabin at the top of the tower. Just me, the wind, and the wilderness. It was late October when it happened. My last solo rotation of the year. The first 2 days were uneventful. I logged the usual reports. A couple low-lying fog banks near Black Elk Ridge, smoke from a permitted burn 2 valleys over. But on the 3rd day, I noticed something strange. The fog hadn't lifted. That wasn't unusual in itself. Valley fog can hang for hours, especially in colder months, but this one was different. Thicker, grayer. It didn't swirl or shift like normal fog. It just sat there, like a lid had been placed on the world. I watched it from the tower as it crept up the sides of the valley, slow and deliberate, swallowing trees and rocks in its path. By nightfall, the tower itself was engulfed. I shut the windows, lit the lanterns, and tried to shake off the unease that was starting to build in my gut. I'd seen plenty of storms and strange weather up there, but something about this fog made my skin crawl. It muffled sound too well. Even the usual night-time forest calls, owls, distant coyote yips had fallen completely silent. That night I woke up to someone whispering outside the tower. It wasn't clear at first, just soft murmurs like someone speaking through cotton. I thought maybe I'd left the radio on, but it was off, the battery pulled. I sat up in bed listening, and it came again, closer this time. A voice, right below the cabin floorboards. I grabbed my flashlight and tiptoed to the trapdoor, opened it a crack. Nothing, just white, endless fog. But when I stepped out onto the metal steps, I felt it. Movement. Something passed below. Not fast, not running, just slow, dragging footsteps along the gravel path at the tower's base. I called out, "Hey, this is a restricted area. Identify yourself." The footsteps stopped. There was a pause. And then, clear as day, a voice responded. "You left the door open." I felt the blood drain from my face. There was no one scheduled to be near Station 14, and I hadn't left any door open. I pulled my sidearm and climbed down the steps slowly, flashlight cutting through the fog like a dull knife. I reached the base and scanned in every direction, but I couldn't see more than 10 feet. Everything was swallowed in thick, gray cotton. I waited in the silence for almost 10 minutes before heading back up, and that's when I noticed the cabin door was standing wide open. I hadn't heard it, didn't see anyone climb the steps, but it was open, swaying slightly on its hinges. The lantern inside flickered wildly, like it had been disturbed. I swept the room. Nothing. But the journal I'd been keeping, my shift log, was open to a page I hadn't written, and across it, in handwriting that wasn't mine, was a single sentence. "You are not alone." I didn't sleep the rest of the night. Kept the rifle beside me and the lantern burning until sunrise, which barely broke through the fog. I tried to radio in the incident, but all I got was static. No weather reports, no chatter from the fire station, just silence. I thought about hiking out, but the trail would be invisible in that soup, and getting lost in those woods without visibility is a death sentence. So I stayed. Around midday, I heard the bell. There's an old cast-iron bell mounted near the bottom of the tower. It's decorative, mostly. Used to be for signaling in the days before radios. I hadn't touched it in months, but I heard it ring twice. Then silence. When I peered out the window, I could just barely make out the figure standing next to it. It looked like a man, but there was something wrong with the way it stood. Its limbs hung too long. Its shoulders hunched in a way no spine should curve, and its face, what little I could see, was turned up toward the tower, unmoving. I watched it for nearly an hour. It never flinched, never paced, just stood there. When I blinked, it was gone. No sound, no retreating footsteps, just gone. That night, the whispering returned. This time from inside the cabin. I followed it to the trapdoor. It was closed. But I swear to you, I swear there was something beneath the boards, pressing against them, breathing. I pressed my ear to the floor, and I heard it say, "Why did you come alone?" I backed away, locked the trapdoor, turned on every light I had. Sat in the center of the room with my rifle across my lap until morning. When the sun rose, the fog lifted, just like that. I packed up my gear, hiked down, and never looked back. Didn't even wait for Marty to arrive for his shift. Left him a note at the ranger station. Don't go up there. Something's wrong. Later, when I turned in my resignation, I asked one of the senior rangers, an older man named Wayne, if he'd ever seen anything strange up near Station 14. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "You ever hear of the Bone Whisperers?" I hadn't. He told me it was an old tale about spirits in the fog, things that lingered in the high woods. They don't speak with mouths, but with memories. They copy your voice, your handwriting. They pull pieces of you into themselves. They're not evil, he said. They're just lonely. I don't know what I encountered up there, but I've never been the same. The woods don't feel like home anymore. They feel hungry. And every now and then, usually at night, I'll wake up and find a page torn from my old shift journal sitting on my kitchen table. It always says the same thing. You left the door open. My name is Caleb Firewalker, and this happened to me in the fall of 1993. I was 34 at the time, working as a wilderness safety instructor and part-time volunteer ranger near the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. I've always been comfortable in the woods. Hell, I grew up in them, but that year something shifted. Something old stirred out where the leaves rot slower and the trails vanish overnight. There's a place out there they call Dead Man's Hollow. Real creative name, I know, but it's stuck. It's a narrow gorge filled with deadfall trees and thick fog, the kind of place that eats up sunlight even at noon. The old-timers never go near it. They claim it's cursed. You hear that kind of thing a lot in these parts, so I never paid much attention until I had to. It started with the missing hiker. Name was Jody Harper, 28, solo backpacker from Charleston, last seen heading north along the Green Ridge Trail. She was experienced, smart, left detailed itineraries, knew what she was doing. But 3 days past her expected return, we still hadn't heard a word. Search and rescue got involved, and I was asked to help coordinate the grid. We combed every path, every ravine, every deer trail. Nothing. Not even a torn strap or boot print. On the 5th day, we found her tent not in the direction she said she was heading, but on the edge of Dead Man's Hollow. The thing is, the tent was set up neat. Sleeping bag laid out, food hung in the trees. No sign of a struggle. Her journal was zipped inside her pack. The last entry dated the same day she vanished. I heard the whistling again last night. It's getting closer. That made my blood run cold. I didn't know why yet, but something about it felt wrong. Like a memory I didn't know I had. A few of us stayed the night near the campsite, hoping she'd come back. We'd pitched tents, built a fire, rotated watch shifts, but around 2 a.m., I woke up without knowing why. The fire was down to embers. The woods were deathly quiet. And then I heard it. A whistle. Just 2 notes. Low and slow. From somewhere down in the hollow, I sat up, heart pounding, hoping it was just the wind. But then it came again, same 2 notes. Almost melodic. I stepped outside and looked at the others, Donnie and Mark, still asleep. I wanted to wake them, but I couldn't move. Something in the whistle felt personal, like it was meant for me. It stopped after a few minutes, and I finally crawled back into my tent, shaken, but trying to reason with myself. Wind in the rocks, owl calls, an echo. That's all. The next morning I asked if anyone else heard it. Donnie said no. Mark just looked at me weird and said he'd had a dream about someone standing outside his tent, humming. We radioed the sheriff and decided to move deeper into the hollow. The terrain got worse fast. Steep drops, ankle-breaking roots, patches of moss that stank like rotten meat. Around noon, we found Jody's scarf tangled in the branches of a dead dogwood tree. Mark started down a nearby deer path, calling her name, when he tripped on something. A string. Fishing line stretched tight across the trail. We followed the line and found a hole set up, bells, noisemakers, tripwires. Someone had been rigging up warning traps in a circle. Inside the perimeter were piles of bones, small ones, mostly animal. But there were human ones too. I radioed for the sheriff again, but the static was so thick it sounded like underwater screaming. Donnie tried his handheld. Nothing. Effing. That's when Mark pointed. There was someone standing just beyond the traps, pale, barefoot, wearing something like a buckskin coat, except it looked patchy, stitched. It took a step back into the trees and vanished. Mark shouted, took off after it. Donnie yelled at him to stop, but it was too late. We chased after him, found his flashlight and his knife stuck in a tree. No blood, no mark. We camped there that night. Not because we wanted to, but because we had no choice. The fog rolled in thick and fast. Couldn't see 10 feet. We kept a fire going, kept watching shifts. Around midnight, the whistling came back. Same 2 notes. Donnie lost it. He started shouting into the dark, daring it to show itself. I tried to calm him, but the next thing I knew, he was gone too. No scream, no rustle, just gone. I stayed by the fire with my back to the largest tree. I didn't sleep. The whistling stopped just before dawn. When the sun rose, I saw the perimeter line had been moved. Now it was wrapped around my camp. I don't remember running. I don't remember climbing or how I got back up the ridge. But I came out of the hollow by mid-afternoon, scratched and shivering and half delirious. Sheriff Harlan found me stumbling along the trailhead. I told him everything. He went in with a team of 6. They never found Donnie or Mark. Jody was never recovered either. The line of tripwires was gone. So were the bones. The official report says they were lost hikers. Accidents, bears, maybe. But I know what I heard, what I saw. I went to speak with an elder in my tribe a few weeks later, my Uncle Peter. I told him about the whistles, the traps, the eyes in the trees. He looked at me long and quiet. You met the whistler, he said finally. One of the old ones. Not a spirit, not a man. A watcher, a hunter. He lives in places the land forgot. He picks those who stray too far. Some he keeps. Some he teaches. Some he just takes. I asked why I was spared. You listened, he said, and you came back. That's all you had to do. I don't go into the hollow anymore. I don't lead trips past the ridge. I don't sleep in the open when I camp. But sometimes late at night when the wind shifts just right through the trees, I still hear it. 2 low notes, slow and soft, like a song that wants to be remembered. I don't whistle back, and you shouldn't either. I was 34, single, and had been bouncing between postings in Idaho and Montana for a few years. Crowshead Pines, where this happened, sits near the edge of the Clearwater National Forest, dense, wild, and full of places you can get lost in. Beautiful country, but there's a reason folks around there call it the Pines That Forget. The station was remote, reachable only by a narrow dirt road that had to be cleared every spring. By fall, most of the hikers and hunters had cleared out, and from October through March, it was just me. Some rangers hated the solitude. I welcomed it, at least until that winter. The first sign something was wrong came on a Thursday, mid-January. Snow had fallen all night, and I was checking the trail markers down by Ridge Loop when I noticed something strange. A single line of footprints, bare human feet, pressed deep into the snow, moving up the trail. No shoes, no animal tracks nearby, just feet. At first I thought it was a prank, maybe some backwoods kid trying to screw with the ranger. But the farther I followed them, the more uneasy I got. They didn't stagger like someone cold and barefoot. They were steady, evenly spaced, like whoever it was didn't feel the snow at all. The prints led to the edge of a ridge where they just stopped. No scuffing, no turning around, no drop-off, just vanished. I went back to the station and logged it. Didn't report it to HQ. What would I say? Hey, boss, I found ghost feet in the snow. I chalked it up to exhaustion. But that night I heard the whistling for the first time. It started around 2:00 a.m. soft at first. A low, tuneless whistle, somewhere between a breath and a hum. I sat up in bed, convinced the wind was squeezing through a crack in the window. But then it moved from one side of the cabin to the other. I grabbed my flashlight, threw on a coat, and stepped outside into the freezing dark. Nothing, not a soul, just the trees and the snow and a silence so heavy I could hear the blood in my ears. I told myself it was an owl, went back inside. Didn't sleep. 2 nights later, the whistling came back. This time it was louder, closer. I could hear the inhale between notes, like someone whistling without knowing how. I turned off every light, crouched by the window, and waited. For over an hour it circled the cabin, and then it stopped. The next morning I found something on the porch. A crow, dead, wings folded neatly across its chest like someone had lain it to rest. Its eyes were gone, sockets full of snow. I buried it without thinking, hands shaking so hard I could barely dig. That night I radioed HQ. I told them I needed backup. They said the roads were snowed in and no one could reach me for at least 3 days. I didn't argue. I just locked the doors, loaded the rifle, and waited for dark. The whistling didn't come that night, or the next. But on the 3rd day the wind died, the clouds parted, and I heard it again, just after sundown, except this time there was more than one. 3 distinct sets of whistles, all circling, one high, one low. one broken like a child playing a song they didn't quite know. It came from the trees, the roof, the ground below the floorboards. It was everywhere. And then it knocked. A single knock on the back door. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Then another knock, this time on the front. I aimed the rifle at the door, heart thudding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Something brushed past the window. I saw a shape, thin, tall, and pale as frost. Its arms hung too long, its neck craned at an unnatural angle, and it was smiling. Not like a man smiles, like it learned how to smile from watching one. I fired through the glass. Whatever it was vanished into the dark. After that, everything changed. The snow around the cabin never held prints, but things moved. My boots would end up on the roof, my tools rearranged in the shape of a spiral outside the station. One morning, I woke up to every mirror in the place cracked, split straight down the middle, like something had looked in and didn't like what it saw. I stopped sleeping. I wrote letters I never sent. I spoke out loud just to hear my own voice. On February 6th, HQ finally sent someone, Ranger Paul Latham. He snowshoed in just after sunrise. I told him everything. I expected him to laugh. He didn't. Instead, he took me inside and sat me down. "You ever heard of the Whistler?" he asked. "Not a person. Not an animal. A thing. Old as the trees. Some say it's the spirit of someone who died lost out here. Others say it's older. Something born when the first pine sprouted." I told him I didn't believe in ghost stories. He looked at me, dead serious. "You should." That night we both stayed awake, sat in silence by the fire, rifles ready. The whistling returned, but not circling. This time it came from under the cabin. Paul paled. "It's inside the foundation," he whispered. "We ran, grabbed only what we could carry, hiked all night until we reached the Rangers' shelter 20 miles south. I never went back to Station 12. Neither did Paul. They closed it that spring. To this day, no one talks about Krause Head Pines. It's not on the maps anymore. Locals don't hunt there. The trails are overgrown. The trees are still. But sometimes, when the wind is just right, people say you can hear it. A slow, broken whistle, like something calling you back.